All right, so today what we're going to do is a watercolor portrait. So we need to go to and open up two canvases, so File, New, and we want it 1920 by 1200 pixels. Make sure pixels is selected, make sure the resolution is 300, and this will create a longer canvas. Now if you want a taller canvas, all you have to do is switch the width and the height. So go ahead and hit OK, and you want to make two of those. So File, New, 1920 by 1200, 300 resolution, hit OK. And I now have two canvases. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go find a portrait to put in one of those images. So I'm going to go find my portrait, and I can just go ahead and open it up with Photoshop. So I need to go ahead and put him into one of the canvases. So Control A, Control C, and Control V. Control T to transform, go hold and shift. Make sure you hold shift so it constrains your proportions. And you want it to fill the page so that his head's not cut off anywhere. Okay, hit enter when you are done. And we're going to do some adjustments to this image. So if your image is not black and white, make sure you go to Image, Adjustments, and make it black and white. My image is already black and white, so I can go ahead and adjust the brightness and contrast. I'm just going to adjust it so that I get rid of some of those grays. So I'm going to turn up the brightness. And I'm going to turn up the contrast a little bit too. Click OK when you're done. So what we're going to do now is we're going to be duplicating our layer. So in order to do this, we just simply go to our layers, right-click on Layer 1, and we want to duplicate that layer. And for now, we're just going to call this Watercolor Layer. Okay. So now that we are on the watercolor layer, we're going to go and put a watercolor layer on it. So Filter, Artistic, and Watercolor. If you don't have this setting, all you have to do is go to Edit, Preferences, Plugins, and make sure that Show All Filter Galleries, Groups, and Names are on. All right, so going back to Artistic Watercolor, you might have to zoom out. And here's our image. So you want to pick something that you want. So I would just play around with the brush details, the shadow intensity, and the texture. So play around with that a little bit. I'm going to change some of this brush detail. And then when you're done, go ahead and hit OK. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move the original portrait layer on top of all the other layers. So I'm going to take layer 1, move it up so that I see where I did the brightness and contrast on there. So now what we're going to do is we are going to make sure that layer 1 is selected. We're going to go to Image, Adjustments, Threshold. And we're just going to toggle this to where we see a lot of the details still. We want to make sure we see the eyes, nose, and the mouth. And we're going to click OK when you're done. So we're going to rename this Threshold Layer. So if you double click on it, Threshold Layer. And for the blending option, I'm going to make sure that Threshold Layer selected, and I'm going to choose Multiply. What Multiply does, it really just blends the two together. And we're going to merge both layers. So to merge both layers, I'm going to hold Shift on the keyboard, select both layers, so both layers are highlighted, right-click, Merge Layers. So now I'm just down to 2 layers. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to that other canvas that I had up, and we're going to be painting on that canvas. So you need to find some paint splashes that you like. So say if I like this one, I can just open it with Photoshop. And all I have to do is Control A, Control C, and Control V to paste. Take the move tool and move it over. Now, if you want to use the same paint splatter, you can. You just have to hit Control V again. But every time you add a new layer in, what you need to do, instead of normal mode, you need to hit multiply. Okay? And Control T, because we want this to look like a different paint splatter, and simply rotate your image. And you want to continue to do that until your whole painting is pretty much covered in splotches. So here's an example of one. So I'm going to click out of this one. So here's the end result. Here's my portrait layer. Okay. So now we're going to put it all together. So how we do that, we need to take this and put it on the portrait layer. So again, Control A, Control C, go to your portrait layer, Control V on top. So now I have a painted layer, I have my threshold layer, and then I have my background layer. So what we need to do is we need to click the eyeball off the painted layer so we can see that threshold layer, that merged layer. Actually, let's call it merged layer so we don't get it confused. Okay, so I have my eyeball off my painted layer. Go ahead and select merged layer. And we want to copy it all. So Control A, Control C, and go ahead and turn the eyeball back on layer 1. And what we're going to do is create a mask. So in order to create a mask, our layer 1 has to be highlighted. And we're going to go down here to the mask tool and add layer mask. So in order to get to that layer mask, we have to hold Alt on our keyboard and click on that little white piece of paper, and the white piece of paper will appear. So we got to paste our portrait, so Control V, and you might need to move it over or resize it. And to get rid of the ants, Control D to deselect. Now at this point, we have to invert our image. So to invert something, Control I to invert. And all we have to do is we have to just click on the painting for the image to appear. Now I don't need my merged layer anymore, so I can just click the eyeball off my merged layer. So at this point, our painting's pretty much done. What we can do now is place a background texture onto our work. So I'm going to go and find a background image.